Welcome into LTSN. Coach Duvendek likes to tell his guys competition breeds success. And the Blue Devil football program will have an opportunity for finally a little live competition for the first time since the reboot season wrapped up on November 17th. A wonderful day for the program's second spring game. Pleasure to be back with you. I'm Jason Rush Jr. 13 spring practices are in the books, and football is back. A bit of sunny, slightly windy day, 50-degree day here at Farmington Hills Harrison High School. The first handoff to Kayvon Higdon, stretching it out to the left side. He finds some room, getting about 7 there. And this Blue Devil football program excited to be back on the field, anxious and ready to go after a tough camp. First play, Kayvon Higdon, a guy who they hope to see more of that next year and hope to see quite a bit of it. He is such a hard worker. Was out here before everyone today, 11:30 a.m., running the length of the field. And that's just the kind of guy he is, the kind of mentality he carries into every game. Tyler Kolka starting at quarterback today on the blue side. Blue side wearing is the offense, and the white team will be the defense today. There's Makai Otero and Thomas Lappin making the tackle, one of the defensive captains. Our scoring system today, offensive touchdown, 6 points. An extra point would give you another 1. A field goal of 39 yards or less, 3 points. Field goal of 40 or more, 4 points. A run of 12 or more will give you 2 points. A pass of 16 yards or more will give you another 2. A first down is 2 points. And a penalty charge to the offense would take away a point. On the defensive side of things, a takeaway would result in 7 points. Turnover on downs, 5. A sack, 2, and a tackle for a loss. You'll have 1. Penalty, -1. 3 and out, 1. And a safety, 2. This could be our first negative loss today. Makai Otero running the ball once again there. One of 3 backs in the rotation for Lawrence Tech. That'll set up 4th down. We have 10-minute quarters today, 4 10-minute quarters, a running clock until the final 2 minutes. Our first punt of the day. Was fair caught by Cam Mitchell, another one of the captains. On the defensive side of things, he really leads the DB core that we get to see today. One of their shutdown corners, no doubt about that. And as I mentioned, these guys were so excited to get out here today, and I talked to Coach Duvendek before the game. He told me what he would like to see out of today is we want to compete. We want to give it our best, whether it's football, whether it's the classroom, the weight room. We want to compete not only with the people around us, but with ourselves. One of his better quotes that I like to go to is, did I give my best today? Did I get 3% better? He feels if we can do that day in and day out over 4 years, it's going to be a successful 10-year. And last year was the reboot season. Next year they'll jump into the Mid-States Football Conference, and that'll be the first season where the games will actually have implications as we see Tanner Jessica check in for the first time today at quarterback. Looking for Kendall Williams there. Pass is incomplete. Coach said that he would love to see the kids have some fun today, see some kids step up and be leaders, hopefully compete, and he wants to see that response to adversity. That was one of the areas where this Blue Devil program struggled in the reboot season, a 5-3 year. They started out 5-0, then lost their final 3 games of the year, 2 losses to Indiana Wesleyan. Those were probably, if you could say there were 2 important games or point out what could be the most important games that season, those were the 2, and we'll get into that throughout the broadcast. Here's a handoff to Otero from Jessica, and he goes down after a gain of about 3. Makai Otero, the Orlando, Florida native, Cypress Creek High School. A guy who really earned his carries last year. Has the ability to break a run. Kind of a mixed skill set, not afraid to lower the shoulder. Getting the majority of the carries through these first couple of possessions here. An early point for the defensive team on the tackle for a loss in that last possession. Otero once again trying to get through the gut of the defensive line. Let's see if that was a loss. DeMarcus Bush made that tackle. Another guy who could be a force in the defensive line, 6'2", 245 out of Burton, Michigan. A guy who said after signing with LTU football that he really was excited to be a part of the development, bringing football back on campus for the first time since 1946. 5:25 to go in this opening quarter, the second ever spring game for LTU football, second played here at Harrison High School. Connor Grobel kicking away. Kendall Williams comes in, muffs the football. Jalen Smith picks it up. And they're going to blow it dead on the 30-yard line. Another couple of points for the defense. 3-0 now in their favor. It will be offense going up against the defense throughout the entirety of the day. Looks like Kolka back in there, so you wonder if maybe they are just kind of alternating reps, Kolka and Jessica. Jessica got some really key reps last season. The Blue Devils started their season out with a few blowouts. It was a blowout win over Oakland's club team to begin the year. Then they did face some adversity right away in week 2, having to come back on the road against Wisconsin Lutheran. They rattled off 27 unanswered points after trailing 22-3. So that was a game that Coach Duvendek pointed out to me in our interview last week. He said that was one of the best reactions to adversity that he's ever seen from a freshman group, let alone looking at maybe a senior group filled with a mix of variety. But he really enjoyed that game, and they'll see with Wisconsin Lutheran in week 2, actually, when the fall does get going. Opening up the season with St. Xavier. That'll be a tall task. Xavier was one of the better teams in the Mid-States Football Association last season. We'll get into that throughout the broadcast. Here's a handoff. Once again, going to Otero, and he is met promptly. That time, getting it on the hit was Kay Dixon, a Linden, Michigan native. A gain of 4 yards there. They're going to call it 3, actually, so second down and 7. And don't forget that 2019 season tickets are now available. LTU will play their first couple of games at home. They'll jump right into conference play on September 7th, as I mentioned. First season that will have implications, and it'll be a full 12-game college football slate. Here's a dump off from Kolka, able to find C.J. Thompson there, one of their tight end targets from Alma, Michigan. Along with Matthew Elrod, they had a really nice reboot season, and Elrod was one of the top go-to targets. So was C.J. Thompson. He had about 31 yards per game receiving. These guys had a couple of 5 a.m. practices this week, and that's really how it was throughout the entirety of the spring. They had some early alarms, so good to see all the hard work pay off in this one. I asked Coach Duve what was the most mentally tasking part of spring practice, and he said the internal competition. Noted that in the fall, your competition is mostly against your opponents as Kolka looks deep here and finds a man throwing down inside the 20. It's Kendall Williams, one of his top go-to targets in the regular season, Florida native, one of 9 Floridians on the roster. And he's getting back to that note. Coach Duve said in the spring, guys are really trying to move up spots. There is that mentality of I'm trying to take your spot. You don't have that as much in the fall. But he said it was really competitive, but they also did a good job of keeping that competition on the field, and then off the field, that camaraderie is being built, going out to dinner with each other, things like that, playing video games together. Most of these guys live together. Nice connection there from Kolka to Williams, something that Blue Devil fans will hope to see more of once the fall rolls around. Here's Kolka once again in the shotgun set. Mostly a pro-style offense for the Blue Devils. Kolka opts to tuck and run here. Gets past the man and scoots his way into the end zone. Tyler Kolka, got a chance to speak with him before the game. Great guy. A guy who said his dream was to play college football. He waltzes into the end zone there. Excellent story. The 6'2 QB out of Clinton Township, Michigan. Was very efficient last season. Didn't see a ton of that from Kolka last year, as it's now a 12-3 lead for the offense after the touchdown worth 6 points. They can add on one more with the extra point here. This was an offense that broke the program record for points in the game on 3 different occasions last year. They do indeed tack on one more with 3:08 to go in this opening quarter of the second ever spring game for LTU football. Band in attendance, nice crowd beginning to fill in. 50-degree crisp day, kind of feels like the fall, doesn't it? The reboot season began last year with a 53-14 win over Pitt, a game that was actually cut short due to lightning in the area, but what a day that was, what a scene that was. There was a listed capacity of 2,000 people, and we ended up getting a shade under 3,800. So it was certainly a special day, smelling the aroma of a game day. The grills fired up before noon. Fans walking over to the L2 athletic field that is currently under construction, adding more seating in over there. It was the first game since 1946 for Blue Devil football, and the sights and sounds were certainly very pleasant on that September Saturday afternoon. There's a buzz around campus, and this year we hope to pick that right back up with a full slate of games. Now Tanner Jeska in at quarterback. A 3-receiver set for Jeska. He fakes the handoff, looks left under pressure from Wallace Tagata. Obviously, you can't hit the quarterback in the spring game, so once that defense gets the initial pressure, just a little light tap there, and that's all you need for a sack. The sack is worth 2 points for the defensive side, so they're up to 5 now, 12-5 to score, favoring the offense. So 2:45 to go in the opening quarter. Running clock again until the last 2 minutes of each half. Our Blue Devil broadcasting crew back in action today for some spring football. Proud to be back with you. Jason Rush Jr., producer Kia Tyus, our excellent crew running the 2-camera setup today up top. Pro-style offense is what you'll see for the most part from this Blue Devil offense, a 4-3 defensive look usually. Once again, opting to tuck and run. This time it's Jeska sliding his way through. Let's see where they spot this. Gain of 4, so we'll move it up to 5. So 3rd and 5 is the upcoming down for this Blue Devil team on the offensive side. I mentioned they rattled off 3 efforts where they topped the program record for points in the game. It was 3 consecutive 60-point games that got them to 5-0 after that 22-3 deficit they faced at Wisconsin Lutheran in Green Bay. Next 3 games reached 5-0 and then lost the final 3. Jeska looking that time for Otero on the little rollout from the running back. Interesting to see Otero taking the majority of the snaps today in that running back position. It is Tanner Foley and Ahmad Sabah both out. And those would be the other 2 backs in what was a kind of a 3-headed monster. They all had their own little spurts of success. Tanner Foley was what you could consider the number 1 running back in the rotation. He is a captain. Talked about how much of an honor it was to be named a captain, as this will bring up another punt here. Sabah is kind of the power back of the 3, and he's also out today. Foley more of a finesse back, but he isn't afraid to lower the shoulder. He can break runs, had some issues with ball security at times. This Blue Devil team as a whole had issues with discipline, and that's probably the number 1 aspect of improvement that we'll hope to see when the fall does roll around. That was big in the loss to Indiana Wesleyan on the homecoming day, where they had a chance, ended up losing that one 38-14, then lost to them once again in the game that got away from them in the second half. That was at Indiana Wesleyan. Those were the two games that might be the most emblematic of what we'll see when the conference season rolls around, as Indiana Wesleyan will also join the Mid-States Football Association, a league that is very, very strong. We'll get into that as Tyler Kolka is back in here. The Chippewa Valley High School native. He opts to hand it off that time. Kolka was one of the first guys out in the field, as usual, before this one got underway, along with Kayvon Higdon, who was the first one out there running the length of the field. Such a hard worker, as I mentioned earlier today. They've already connected once. An offense with a wealth of options. We saw Kendall Williams join the mix. Spencer Iaquinto. So 12-5, the offense leads it. And here is a rollout to the right. It's Nick Spawn on the reception. He takes a big hit out of bounds, and the pads are back and popping. Spring football is underway. There's a little welcome back after the nice reception from Nick Spawn. Another one of the go-to receivers, Phoenix, Arizona native. Right on cue, as I mentioned, those wealth of options that they can go to when this offense is clicking. Very balanced attack it was through those first 5 games when they got off to the 5-0 start. But it really starts with the run game for this group and establishing the line of scrimmage. That's what they preach. And when they're doing that, that in turn sets up the passing game, as you typically see in the pro-style offense. So they feel that games are won and lost in the trenches. That was kind of the message throughout the season. We do have some offensive linemen out today. James Thorpe, who is one of the captains, a leader on that offensive line, one of a couple of Florida natives on that offensive line, along with John McKelvin. So they hope to get him back and healthy. Kolka still in there on the offensive side of things. He'll drop back. He'll launch down the sideline. Bit out of the reach that time, looking for back-to-back plays to Nick Spawn. The Blue Devils had a bad loss to Northern Michigan last season, and Nick Spawn was really the lone bright spot in that game with 142 receiving yards. That was a game where I mentioned the battle in the trenches kind of got away from them in that one, as it did against Indiana Wesleyan late. And then cleaning up the mistakes, haven't really seen anything so far. But even when they were up at times, the discipline was kind of an issue. We saw it against Eastern Michigan. So that'll be the number one focus from an outsider's perspective looking in on this Blue Devil football group in year 2. 12-game schedule will be another aspect to adjust to. These players naturally had to adjust to playing even an 8-game schedule last season after coming in, as Coach Duvenig told me, they were used to playing shorter seasons during their high school days, probably not used to all the workouts in the off season. These guys came in July, and they were really going hard in the summer. That led into that reboot season, as they called it. They will open up with St. Xavier, who won the Midwest League last season. Finished ranked number 7. There are 2 leagues, 2 divisions in the Mid-States Football Association, similar to what you could see if you're a Big Ten football fan in the East and West divisions. It's similar to that. And St. Xavier finished number 7 in the NAIA. As there's a completion that time, once again for the second time today, finding C.J. Thompson. It's a cap off the month. We'll have St. Francis. So not an easy opening month of competition for this Blue Devil football program. The St. Francis team that won 10 games. It It'll be interesting to see how the Blue Devils react to that level of competition, as Indiana Wesleyan and LTU will be the two teams joining the MSFA next year. By virtue of those two meetings last season, they've already kind of built up an inherent rivalry. Indiana Wesleyan did pull away in the second half of both of those matchups. Once again, they'll have the second of what will be a home-and-home series with Wisconsin Lutheran next year. That'll be at home. Kolka muffed that snap that time, had to jump on it. It was a lower snap. 18-5 now, the score in favor of the offense. 7:20 to go on the rolling clock in this first half of the spring game. If you're just tuning in, it's a rolling clock until the last 2 minutes of each half. So we're about 5 minutes away from the clock stopping between plays. Big day in LTU athletics. A chance for two WAC titles today on the women's and men's lacrosse side. Both of those guys traveling down to Fort Wayne. So good luck to our lacrosse teams. Baseball also in action. Final week of our broadcast. Bit of an emotional week for us, but glad to have football back as Kolka takes the snap, looks under pressure. Threw it out to the right side. Not sure if they called the play dead before that. Defense was applying some pressure with Matt Esterly and Michael Woolridge, a couple of the starters on the defensive side. Esterly, one of the captains, getting some pressure there, the Akron, Ohio native. Really has a personality that attracts his teammates, and he's one of the captains, very well-spoken guy, excellent personality, leads by example. Was able to breach the offensive line that time around. He is a real force, real competitive guy. We'll bring up 3rd down and 10 with about 6 minutes to go in this first half. Another single set formation with 3 receivers. Kolka drops back, once again feeling the pressure, and they'll blow it down again in favor of the defense. It was Esterly on the outside. When he gets hot, he really feels it defensively. That'll bring up 4th and 10 for the offense, a group that finished 5-3 last season. Team that finished with 21 sacks as a defense and really had one of the better defenses in the NAIA through the first 5 games, if you want to count those stats, as Kayvon Higdon catches that. And the pressure, no hitting the punt returners as well. Most colleges will do that in their spring games. Want to keep everyone safe today. That's obviously one of the goals coming into any spring game, is to avoid injuries, avoid penalties, keep it clean, and get out there and compete. Coach Duve said he will hope to see some leaders arise in this spring game today. And as Jessica gets back out there in the QB position. Monroe, Michigan native, Airport High School. Blue Devils were 37 of 93 on 3rd down last year, by the way. It was kind of a cool story how they started on 4th down. They, I believe, were 4 of 4 or something like that through the first couple of games, and were excellent on the 4th down. So, hey, that could be a perk certainly going in. Here's Jessica dropping back, stepping through the pocket. He'll opt to tuck and run for the second time today, a little pirouette, and I believe they'll give him a 1st down. Coach Duve said that he thought the kids did a phenomenal job of getting set out of the gate and starting fast last season. Said he had been warned by a lot of people not to make the first season too taxing, even to the extent that they played with 8 games. He felt maybe it was a little too much for the young roster as they kind of fell apart towards the latter half, losing their final 3. Said, as I mentioned, the guys were used to shorter seasons. So by the time that season ended, they were really worn out on November 17th, a lot of practicing. Team that really focuses on conditioning. They put an emphasis on that as Otero burst through the hole. He'll take all the carries today, it appears, with the other two running backs out in Tanner Foley and Ahmad Sabah. So some good reps for Otero today. Naturally, in the first year of doing anything in life, you learn by making mistakes and then addressing those mistakes. They also want to address the depth. They obviously have a recruiting class coming in next year. Those guys will arrive towards the end of the summer. We'll find out how that element affects the current depth chart. Coach Duve told me that he feels they brought in guys who can really compete with the current roster. So that'll be very interesting. They did recruit at the quarterback position, recruited at the running back position, already pretty much every position, and they feel this was a solid recruiting class, a deep recruiting class. As we get some movements on that line there. Hitting the deck was Logan Wessel, Utica High School. And getting back to the subject of the Blue Devils recruiting class, they were very pleased with it. And coming in next year, they'll be highlighted by Detroit Kings, Curtis Maxwell, James Drain out of Harper Woods, a couple of very talented offensive linemen, as we see a bit of an infraction there. They will give the offense 5 free yards on the defensive encroachment. But the Blue Devils have a philosophy, as I mentioned, of games being won and lost in the trenches. Hunter Neff is another really good receiver that they'll be bringing in next year that they feel very good about. So players that could perhaps step into offensive roles right away as freshmen. Here's Jessica rolling out. Opts to flip to the near side and has his man Chris McCoy, tight end from Elmhurst, Illinois. All three of those guys that I mentioned, they will be selected to play in the D-Zone East versus West All-Star game. No other NAIA school had multiple guys selected to play in that aforementioned All-Star game. So once again, LTU landed 3 guys playing in the game, and that was certainly what you could call an ahead of schedule achievement for this Blue Devil football program that is certainly still in its infancy. Approaching the points in this spring game where we will stop the clock. It's at 2:32 right now. It'll stop once we get to the final 2 minutes of each half. Last year's spring game went down to the wire. It was some late plays made by the defense. Really fun, competitive affair, but the offense has jumped out to a 26-7 lead now. But who knows? The defense could maybe make a push towards the latter half of this scrimmage. Fun to see the guys get back out there today after 13 hard-fought spring practices. They were in the gym, along with that, working out early in the morning. A lot of early alarms that were set. They feel that the biggest difference between last year's spring game and this year's competition is there was a level of stress that went along with last year. It was the first spring game, so they didn't really know what to expect. They've also been around the coaching staff for a longer period of time now. They have an understanding of what the coaches expect in this game and what they want to do. So Coach Dew feels the competition will be higher today, more intense. They feel that they'll be less nervous. Here's Jessica going downfield looking for Higdon. It was picked off. 7 interceptions last season for these defensive backs. That time it was Jalen Smith, the Flint native, out of a very excellent high school program in Carmen Ainsworth. And he gets in the backfield that time on the pass that was intended for Higdon. Jalen Smith is a guy that could be a starter next year. A very deep group of defensive backs led by Cam Mitchell. But Jalen Smith, a great kid, had a chance to speak with him before the season last year. Really excelled during his high school days, and that is the first interception of the day. 7 points for a takeaway on the defensive side of things. We do have some laundry out in the field, but the play will stand. So 14 now for the defense. I mentioned maybe they could make a push here, and they do cut it down to what would be a 2-score game if we were going by a regular scoring system. So now the offense will line up on their own goal line after the turnover. Tyler Kolka once again under center. Found 6 different receivers in the spring game last season. Doing a nice job of spreading the wealth here, and he'll roll out to pass on the first play from scrimmage for the offense. Back out there, tuck and run for the second time today, and scoots out of bounds. Picking up 7 yards there. 1:04 to go in the opening half of play in the second annual Blue Devils spring game. Nice crowd today on hand. 50-degree crisp day. Feels a bit like fall. Kolka's vocal leadership was really an advantage for this Blue Devil offense last season. As I mentioned, a guy that puts an emphasis on getting out there early and often. He was one of the first 2 guys out on the field today. They go to the run game. Otero, after a short gain, will go down. Looks like Fareed Saluade making the hit there. Sugar Land, Texas native. His family oftentimes tuned into the broadcast last season. Fort Bend Austin High School, one of 4 Texas natives on the roster. He could be a force, another one of those linebackers. Thomas Lappin, Robbie Best, Fareed, Kai Ramos, Cam Gillette. Those guys really did a nice job as linebackers last year. Can't go without mentioning Drake Berry, another captain for today's spring game. Daniel Max, some really competitive linebackers on this Blue Devil team. That'll bring up 3rd and short for the offense with the clock rolling at 11 seconds after the run. Now 9 seconds. Kolka, the snap with 4 seconds. Just one more run to close out the half. Otero bottled up. Lappin leading the rush along with Esterly. Saluade was in there. And that will take us to the whistle. So 26-14 after the first half of play in our spring game. The second annual on a 50-degree day here in Farmington Hills, Michigan native. It was a fun back-and-forth first half. Glad to see the guys get back out there. We'll expect to see it getting even tighter in the second half of action. Welcome back to LTSN. Second half of our spring game is underway. Spring season is here, and spring football is where it is at this time of the year. Trees are blossoming, weather is warming up, and Blue Devil football is back for at least a little bit today. Here's a handoff to open things up with Tanner Jessica in at quarterback. 28-14 in favor of the offense, wearing blue today, was the score after the first half. It'll be a running clock throughout this half. Once again, an offensive touchdown is worth 6 points. An extra point will be adding on one more. Field goal of 39 or less is 3 points. Field goal of 40 or more, 4. A run of 12 or more gets you 2 points. A pass of 16 or more gets you another 2. A first down is 2 points. And a penalty would lose a yard. Jason Ross Jr. back with Kia Tyus, our producer. Our excellent LTSN crew. Happy to be back for a little football in the springtime. This Blue Devil football program went 5-3 last year. They'll open up their season on September 7th against St. Xavier when they jump into the Mid-States Football Association. St. Xavier won the Mid-States Football Association Midwest League last year. Here's a run to the outside. It's bottled up. Chris McCoy, a guy who could be a potential addition to this core of receivers and tight ends. Didn't see him very often last year. I asked one of the receivers before the opening game last year what they felt the strength of this receiving corps is, and they said that they really feel they just have a group of guys with speed, a nice blend of talent, guys who can go up and snatch balls out of the air. So a nice mix of ability among that receiving corps. We've seen Kayvon Higdon get involved today, Matthew Elrod, Kendall Williams, Spencer Iaquinto out there. Jessica getting the first reps of the second half at quarterback. He'll drop back, look to pass again, dumping over the middle, picked off for the second time today. We have an interception, and the defense is pulling a bit closer. That's Eric Winston. So 28-21 now for the second year in a row. This spring game getting a bit tighter down the stretch. Defensive coordinator Dan McEwen has to be happy with that. He said at the end of last year's spring game that, at the end of the day, we are very young, and that's still kind of, I guess, where they are this year, but mentally they aren't as young as last year. And the intense competition up this season, they really feel the guys know what the coaching staff wants a bit more than last season. The second interception today leads to more points for the defense, bobbling that pass on the occasion. Intended that time for C.J. Thompson. He was met promptly by Danny Max, another really good linebacker for this team. Excellent lateral movement, as you saw there. Can move from left to right. Led the team with 5.9 tackles per game last year. Rather, he was second on the team with 5.9 tackles per game. One of the defensive captains had 8 tackles in that homecoming game against Indiana Wesleyan. There's Iaquinto moving to the near sideline. Spencer Iaquinto, the Italian stallion, will forever be an excellent trivia question for Blue Devil football, for Blue Devil football historians, I guess. If you were to ask someone who was the first player to catch a touchdown pass in a Blue Devil uniform since 1946, number 87 is the answer. Spencer Iaquinto caught the first touchdown pass in the modern era last season against Oakland's club team. Very nice guy. I've had the opportunity to become friends with him over the past couple of months, and he is as nice of a guy as you'll ever chat with. And all of his teammates love him. That's one of the reasons he's a captain. Kolka in shotgun formation. Pressure coming down the middle. It's C.J. Thompson galloping all the way down to the 21. Clinton Township, Michigan native to Alma Township, Michigan native there. A nice hook up, and it's the largest of the game. .6:05 to go in this third quarter. Those tight ends, as I said last season, were really a valuable asset for this Blue Devil team and that pro-style offense. That time just kind of down the slot, able to find Thompson. They hope to see a lot of that next season. Otero on the handoff. Once again up the middle. Short gain. Blue Devil defensive line did a really nice job of clogging things up last season. Not allowing much breathing room there. Harrison High School, the location of the Blue Devil spring game for the second consecutive season. New facilities are on the way in Southfield at the Point, the L2 Athletic Field. Permanent seating for 4,000 fans on the way. I mentioned last year the incredible scene that they had on opening day where they flooded that place. I mean, there was only 2,000 seat capacity, and they ended up having a shade under 3,800 people, standing room only, and they really surrounded the L2 Athletic Field. But in future years, as soon as next season, they won't have to do that, as the pass is incomplete that time. Kolka looking to the sideline for Nick Spawn. Hooked up with him a couple of times in the first half. That Blue Devil athletic field, newly renovated, will eventually include a proposed double-decker press box with suites, permanent seating for 4,000 fans, more meeting rooms, more training rooms, more weight rooms. Building will be located at the south end of the complex, where you'll have that kind of end of the end zone facility that Indiana Wesleyan has. Potential LED video boards along with stadium lights and speakers should be a real beauty once that gets finished up. Looks like they're going to line this one up at about the 9-yard line for the blue offense. Offense wearing blue, defense wearing white for the entirety of today's spring game. Some breathing room now for the offense, up 32-20. 4:41 to go in the third quarter. Second annual spring game. Kolka looking over the middle that time, and the flag goes flying on the pass interference call. Looks like he had intentions for C.J. Thompson again. Well, penalties are what this Blue Devil coaching staff does not want to see today. That's really what cost them in their lone couple of games against Indiana Wesleyan, the team that will join them in the Mid-States Football Association. And that is one aspect of the leadership on the defense and offensive side of things that Coach Duve wants to see hopefully step up today. And as we mentioned in the first half of things, everyone grows, everyone evolves, and whenever you're doing something for the first time in life, there are going to be those mistakes. You learn from them, and then you take them into the next rep, and this season is essentially the next rep, and the guys are finally back out there in pads. A couple of guys not dressed for today that we'll see once the regular season rolls around. A couple of key players in Ahmad Sabal and Tanner Foley not dressed today. Two running backs in that three running back rotation. A couple of key offensive linemen also out. Defensive line standing their ground there. A pumped up Will Sturts and Matt Esterly able to breach the offensive line that time around. You hope to see this Blue Devil football program evolve in those areas that we spoke about. There were 2 fumbles. They actually put the ball on the ground 4 times in that Indiana Wesleyan game. We get an indication that there was no flag there. They really learned in those in-game situations, late in games where you're either trying to come back or even games where they had large leads, as they did in most of their big wins this season. There's Makai Otero trying to punch it in. I don't know if he quite got there. The Blue Devils had a moment early in the season, as we mentioned in the first half, when they came back against Wisconsin Lutheran. That was one of the, I guess, more positive signals to look on if you're a Blue Devil fan. That time they do punch it in. Makai Otero right up the gut of the defense, and the offense is back on the end zone. Blue Devils had 17 rushing touchdowns a season ago. And now they'll come out for the extra point. Otero had a breakout game against Pitt Club football. He usually won't be taking all the snaps like we're seeing today. He'll typically be paired up with Sabaw and Foley, a couple of other really good backs who also had their moments in this regular season of last year. So 39-19, the lead is ballooned back up to 20 for the offense. Glad to see the guys having fun out there, a lot of smiles on the sideline. You can tell they're just happy to be back playing football again. "13 spring practices led up to this game. Guys will continue their weight training and pick it back up in the summer. Jessica now back out there for the Blue Devil offense. 3 receivers set here. We'll see if they test out the passing game. They'll opt to tuck. No, they'll flip it to Higdon. Little trickery here. They can put Higdon in these situations, and he can really exploit defenses. Running up the sideline there, utilizing the brilliant electricity of Kayvon Higdon. Mentioned he was one of the first guys out on the field today. He was the first guy out on the field today. Incredible legs. Electric athlete. Began the season with an unforgettable statement punt return touchdown against Oakland's club team. Can play multiple positions. He's listed as an athlete, Florida native. Played his high school ball in Utica, Michigan, though. Brother played for Michigan. That's why they moved up here. He's also extremely talented off the field, and I mean extremely talented. Already has 2 companies. He is the owner of 2 businesses, along with being a college athlete and obviously a college student. His companies are Evolution Designs and Rose Drip Clothing. I highly recommend you go check those 2 companies out. A brilliant graphic designer, actually works for State Champs and Yellow Flag Productions in that area. Company that runs our broadcasts. We get another flag out on the field near where that pass was intended. Blue Devils will resume their summer lifting program in mid-May. That will run through July, about 2 weeks before training camp opens. They really feel that spring ball has been great, and Coach Duve said they stayed healthy, which is one of the main keys through getting through it. Obviously, they felt they really grew as a team, felt they had less teaching to do this year. Now the guys are into year 2 of the playbook. Even from our staff, the point of view from the staff, they feel that they're working together, it's flowing and executing. They know how they want to execute in a more advanced position and mentality. A lot more smooth overall. And they'll obviously bring in the new recruiting class. It was a deep recruiting class. A lot of guys excited to join the program. They felt they recruited guys who have the ability to compete with everyone who's on this field right now. And everyone who's on this field right now will be listed as sophomores next year, with the exception of a few players. For captains on the offensive side of things, Tyler Kolka, Spencer Iaquinto, Tanner Foley, James Thorpe, who isn't playing today, along with Tanner Foley. Going to bring up second and short. I feel that they've done a phenomenal job when it comes to the leadership standpoint and then also a competition standpoint from the team as a whole. And now they get to put it out on the field. Jeska looking near side, bobbling that pass, incomplete that time. That was C.J. Thompson, or Chris McCoy, rather. So bring up 3rd and 4 for the offense. Under a minute to go in the third quarter. Clock running. It'll run until the final 2 minutes of the fourth. Offense in firm control now, wearing the blue jerseys, up 38-18. Blue Devils will join the Mid-States Football Association next year, a conference that has claimed 6 of the past 7 national champions at the NAIA level. 3 of the 8 quarterfinalists last season, a very well-respected conference. Had 5 teams that won 9 games last year, and LTU will open up with one of those teams that won 9 games last year in St. Xavier. They split it between the Midwest and the Mid-East divisions, similar to the East versus West look in the Big Ten. I mentioned a recruiting class that was highlighted by a few guys in Curtis Maxwell from Detroit King, James Drain from Harper Woods. A couple of very talented offensive linemen will hope to give a push for this offense led by Tyler Kolka, who will most likely be the starting quarterback again next year. They did recruit at the QB position rather, but Kolka was that leader at the position last season. Jeska comes off the field. He had valuable second string reps against Eastern Michigan when he threw his first touchdown pass. That'll be at the end of the third quarter. And we'll take a quick breather on LTSN. Glad to have football back here at Farmington Hills Harrison High School, with the LTU athletic field still under construction. Fourth and final quarter of our spring game, second annual spring game for LTU football. And back here at Harrison High School, Jason Rush Jr. alongside producer Kia Tyus. Fun day of Blue Devil athletics, a chance to claim 2 WAC championships today. Good luck to our women's and men's lacrosse teams down in Fort Wayne. I believe the women are underway now, about an hour into their matchup. We called that one the other day when they advanced to the championship with a convincing victory. It came over Cleary, and now they'll face Indiana Tech, a rivalry that has really bled into LTU sports, and we'll see it twice today as that pass was deflected at the line of scrimmage, blown incomplete. Baseball also in action today. You can catch that on LTSN. Chase Kaufman on the call there. I mean, taking a step back and looking around LTU athletics today as we're in a rather emotional day of our final day of really broadcasting games. Our football team won't play Indiana Tech, but that's a rivalry that has bled into just about every other sport on campus, that LTU versus ITU rivalry. And today I mentioned 2 teams with chances to claim WAC titles. A year in review for LTU athletics. It was a sensational year for taking just astronomical steps. You look at men's basketball, you look at women's volleyball back in the fall, men's soccer claiming a WAC tournament title. Obviously football in the reboot season. Women's basketball continuing to be so consistent. Tough to rival the win that men's basketball had against Cornerstone. That 17-point comeback against Cornerstone was one for the ages. If we could just have a Hall of Fame for, put win of the year in there or player of the year, that win might be one of the greatest of all time when it comes to LTU athletics. Had the opportunity to call that one. And under head coach Josh Pickens, they've done an excellent job with that program. Took astronomical strides there. And now in the spring, we have 2 opportunities for WAC titles. Also, women's, you have softball and baseball taking some historical leaps. 30-win seasons. Baseball with their first ever 30-win seasons. Softball, their highest win total in program history. So an excellent year for LTU athletics and just hoping to build on it. And obviously that starts today with football. Building on last season and continuing that growth into next year. Here's Jessica and the offense. A very balanced attack last year. They're hoping to build on it. Kayvon Higdon in motion. You'll see that quite a bit next season. Higdon down the slot. Jessica under pressure. Esterly in the backfield along with Wallace Tagada. And that defensive line continues to perform in the spring game. 7:36 to go in the fourth quarter. 40-20. The blue offensive team leads it. Had a 1 p.m. kickoff today. This game obviously runs shorter than the average football game. A running clock today until the final 2 minutes. Defensive coordinator Dan McEwen, his squad doing a nice job there. Higdon comes in, secures that one. Higdon and Kolka were going back and forth in warm-ups, throwing some long passes to each other. You would think that kind of helps Kayvon when, he has to catch those punt returns. One of the more difficult and underrated jobs in the game of football, and he is so good at it. One thing that we won't get to see in the spring game because you don't want to have any injuries, but he is so good at that. Wouldn't be surprised if he takes one back to the house in the opener again next year. They'll open up on September 7th against St. Xavier. That should be a highly anticipated matchup, jumping into conference play and having implications in their games for the first time. Games technically didn't count last year, but if you were to count the stats from last season, they did have some interesting categories when it came to achievements on defense and offense. Kolka back out. As a Blue Devil fan, you look at him as your starting QB for next year. As I mentioned, they did recruit at that position, but Kolka firmly in control. Fakes the handoff. Looks downfield on the comeback route. Nice connection with Kendall Williams. Those two had some nice hookups last year for touchdowns. They found each other in the Indiana Wesleyan matchup the first time around last year. Indiana Wesleyan and Lawrence Tech will meet up only once next season. That'll be to kick off the month of October at Indiana Wesleyan. Some beautiful facilities down there. Kendall Williams, one of the two Florida natives on the offensive side of things. Kayvon Higdon, we mentioned him as well as one of the key pieces for the Blue Devil offense next year. He's also from Florida. Not a lot of size for Williams, but plenty of speed. And that's the mix that the receiving corps has. Just two receivers lined up on the near side of the field this time. They go back to the running game, very balanced attack. Once again, Otero taking all the carries today with Tanner Foley, who was the number one back in the rotation last season, took more carries than anyone else out today, along with Ahmad Sabah. And Dearborn native also out. More power running back style out of the three. So you wonder, considering today's game, obviously the other two guys are out, but who will get the most categories when you have that three running back, or who will get the most carries rather, when you have that three running back look? Five minutes to go in the fourth and final quarter of our spring game. This game obviously doesn't weigh too much on the actual outcome or score. More so just what you want to see. That's what you want to see if you're Tyler Kolka and Spencer Iaquinto. Nice route over the middle there. The Italian stallion making the reception. Whitmore Lake native. As I mentioned, he will forever be the coolest trivia question in Blue Devil football history. He was the first guy to catch a touchdown pass to open things up in last year's inaugural reboot season game against Oakland Club football. Kolka once again, you wonder if they'll try to work on the hurry-up offense down the latter stretch of this game. Kendall Williams, a brilliant catch on the sideline. Just talked about his talents a couple of plays ago, and it's on display there. Inside out, Kolka finding Williams. Band in attendance today. Fun atmosphere. Kendall Williams caught more touchdown passes than anyone last year for this Blue Devil team. Caught 5 to be exact. About 36.7 receiving yards per game. That was the second most on the team. We'll see if they go back to the passing game. They'll opt to run. Otero bottled up, leading the way. It was Thomas Lappin, Robbie Best in as well. 5'10", 175. Robbie Best got around the ankles of Otero that time. The type of guy that boosts everyone's energy, Robbie Best. 5.3 tackles per game, were third on the team last season. .255 to go in this fourth quarter of the spring game. You wonder if they'll test out any sort of a 2-minute drill. Blue Devils kind of struggled last year when they had to hurry things up against their will. Couple of interceptions for the defense today. Positives on both sides. Relatively clean game. Kolka, open C.J. Thompson, touchdown. One of the go-to options at tight ends. He's been good today. C.J. Thompson finding ways to get open. In the spring game, you really try to analyze who will be the designated playmakers. As I mentioned, a couple of them are out today on the offensive side of things. But watching the maturation of a young team, they've gone to the outside, they've gone to the tight ends, they've mixed in the run. The defensive line has done well when defending the run today. I think that's what you wanted to see coming in. Hard-nosed, competitive group of linebackers. They've really had their scent over today's game. Really, really fun year of LTU athletics in general. I mean, we went over it, the advanced coverage of these teams, the LTU Sports Report. That was on Fox Sports Detroit every Monday. We'll have that back for you next year, highlighting this football team among other sports. We are ready for that busy fall season to get here. Obviously, everyone wants to enjoy summer for a bit, but can't wait to dive right back into it with soccer and volleyball and football on Saturdays. First 2 football games will be at home. Should be plenty of fun once fall rolls around on September 7th. Should be a couple of highly anticipated soccer seasons with men's and women's soccer. A young women's soccer team coming back. Men's soccer coming off a WAC tournament championship. Jessica just throws that one away. Over to the sideline, where I think Iaquinto tried to make another reception there. This is a program that, coming into their spring game, is inherently unique in the sense that it was a first-year program last year. So, as we said, everyone on this field, with the exception of a few, are listed as sophomores next year. Had a couple of transfers, but rather than that, the core of the guys are coming back. And unique in the sense that we aren't talking about too many guys leaving through graduation. We aren't talking about any guys leaving through graduation. So, obviously, most teams will deal with that. Blue Devil football won't deal with that for a couple of years. And they'll watch it develop and hopefully take some steps forward next year, as we saw most of our LTU sports teams take. So, should be a fun year ahead. It is really fun to get back on the gridiron today. Get our LTSN crew out here. Jason Ross Jr., Kia Tyus, our hard-working crew in the LTU athletic department. Derek Blaylock hard at work as well. Janiskalski up top, along with Desi Cook. Alex Johnson down in the field. John Kidd out there as well. Here's Tanner Jessica. We've seen him run a couple of times. Opts to throw that time. Nice job to break a tackle. That looks like Mario Rama. It is indeed the long-haired receiver, Mario Rama. Didn't get too many reps last year. Had some health problems, but good to see him out there. Had a chance to talk to him before the beginning of last season. Really nice kid. Great personality. You wonder if he'll get more reps next season as a receiver. A deep core of receivers and a nice spin move there on display from Rama. Nifty footwork, almost balletic on the sidelines. As the seconds continue to dwindle down from Harrison High School. Good to see a lot of smiles on the sideline. You know, these guys wanted to get back out there. Jessica fakes the handoff, rolls right, looking for Ram again. He'll opt to tuck and run. No hitting on the quarterback today, so they'll blow it dead. Just 2 seconds left. And that'll do it for a fun day of football. The guys were able to get back out there on the field and certainly something to build off of and look towards as they continue their weight training program and conditioning program into May. Coaches might want to do a couple more snaps here. Rules aren't super strict when it comes to spring football. You see all the coordinators out on the field, assistant coaches, really nice deep group of coaches that work with these players individually. Can't forget to mention Gabe O'Neill out there as well on the field today, putting together highlights for us. Jessica once again tucking and running, displaying his ability to not only pass, but tuck and run if need be. And speaking of the run game, it didn't take long for all three backs to hit the 100-yard mark last year. So, as I mentioned, 2 of the 3 running backs out today, but could be a balanced attack there as well. But interesting decision heading into the regular season. Where will you go to there? That was Tommy Larson right in the face of Tanner Jessica. Larson, a guy we haven't talked about much today. He wears that same number 51 that he wore at Walled Lake Northern High School, 6'4", 220, plenty of length. You talk about a competitor, not a guy that you want to line up across from. Tommy Larson, 220, 5.5 total sacks last season, led the team. You wonder if, I think they listed that as a sack actually. Physical strength is excellent, always in the weight room, tenacious defensive lineman. If he's gotten better, that'll be pretty scary for guys lining across from him as we get into the regular season that will start on September 7th. Jessica has taken the last few reps for the Blue Devils, that time across the middle, and he's able to seek out Chris McCoy. In this game, Coach Duve on the field, Jessica walking right over to offensive coordinator Heath Beckham, who is a really, really nice guy to talk to. Players really relate to him. So Jessica with Otero right next to him. 3 receivers set here. 4-3 look defensively. Once again, they go with this trickery look to Higdon. Breaks 1 tackle. Gets to the 30. Danny Max making the tackle there. Kayvon's brother, Karan, played for Michigan. Comes from a football family. Kayvon is one of the more electric athletes that you'll ever come across, and we mentioned his skills off the field earlier in the broadcast. Guy with a lot of different talents, and they hope to use them in situations like that next year where they can throw off defenses with looks just like that. Jessica's been showing the wheels throughout the day. He's not afraid to run. That could be another element for this offense. They'll hope to at least attempt to deceive some of the very tough defenses in the Mid-States Football Association next year. mentioned 2019 season tickets are now available. LT will play their first couple of games at home next year. St. Xavier comes to town on September 7th. That should be a fun one. Blue Devils will not have any time to relax when kickoff takes place on September 7th. Team that won 9 games last year. Jessica rolls, fires. Nice low knee-high catch that time. It's Chris McCoy again. One of the messages that Coach Duve is preaching in this spring game is that every rep in the weight room, and really it kind of encompasses the entire spring as a whole, that every rep in the weight room needs to be done at the same level of intensity. Felt there were points in the season last year when guys put more pressure on themselves to play at a higher level than maybe they needed to. He pointed out that homecoming game against Indiana Wesleyan. And number one, because it was homecoming. Number two, because obviously it was an NAIA school in our league, so they felt that maybe that tried to change the practice habits, and he explained to them that that's simply not how it works. It has to be consistent every day, every practice, every weight room session. It has to be a consistent and improving effort, and he thinks they've done a great job of that this spring. Said the guys really attacked the weight room and practices in that manner that they desired. He feels it was a solid recruiting class because of the fact that the staff and players did a phenomenal job. Not only the staff, but the players did a nice job of making the new guys feel welcome. He said the staff did a nice job of identifying talents and fits for Lawrence Tech. They brought in a ton of local talent, which Coach feels is huge for fan support and retention. They tried to address a lot of the depth issues that are kind of inherent when you have a first-year program. One thing he said that really stood out was that they brought in guys who can compete with the current players. So you think that would not only have a positive effect on the new players, but also on the guys that are on this field today. As Jessica rolls away from pressure, out of the reach that time of his intended target, James Cartwright III, who had a nice year last season. And I mentioned the competition, putting some pressure on these guys that will certainly come into play once the fall rolls around and the new guys step out on campus, step onto the practice field. That will perhaps to raise the level of competition. Coach Duvendeck has a great line where he always says, competition breeds success. We want to compete, whether it's football, whether it's the classroom, whether it's the weight room. Did I give my best today? Did I get 3% better? If we can do that day in and day out for 4 years, it's going to be an excellent tenure. Came in today kind of just having the mentality of seeing guys compete, seeing guys perhaps step up into leadership positions. He said you want guys breathing down your neck. You don't want to just be in a stationary position where you get comfortable. You want competition, just like we've had today. We get another flag flying here. Not what they want to see. It's kind of turned into a longer practice today than we expected. The 4 quarters have expired, so no clock anymore. Going to get an illegal man down the field call here. Penalty is declined. And that'll bring up 3rd down. So interesting to see Jessica getting a lot of reps today, preparing him for what you never know could be potential opportunities, potential quarterback battle even. Head coach Jeff Duvendeck will enter his 2nd season as head coach of LTU football. He's obviously been with the program for a few years. Under pressure that time, Otero had to turn back towards Tanner Jeska. Prior to joining Lawrence Tech, Coach Duvendeck was a coach at Culver Stockton College in Missouri, competing in the NAIA. During his 6 seasons at the helm, the Wildcats saw some significant improvements. He hopes to bring that to Lawrence Tech. Blue Devils went to the air there under Coach Duvendeck's watch at Culver Stockton. They did a really nice job when it came to improving the passing game, as the field goal unit will step out here. They had a passing offense ranked 23rd in the country back in 2014. Another flag flies. And similar to what we saw with the Blue Devils last year through those first 5 games in the 5-0 start, during coaches' days at Culver Stockton, they limited offenses to 119 yards per game on the ground, which was pretty good. It was 14th in the nation, so they hope to bring that, as that kick was almost blocked, but then ended up getting in. Coach Duvendeck was also on Michigan State's staff under Mark D'Antonio, and Coach Duvendeck hopefully pleased with what he saw today. Guys got back out in the field, have had some fun, a lot of smiles out there. Blue Devil fans got to watch some football. Band was in attendance. Our broadcast crew is back for the first time since November 17th. Capping off 13 spring practices, a fun spring game, and something to look at, analyze, and hopefully improve on as they'll continue their weight training and midseason program into early May and then pick it back up in early July. The opener will be on September 7th, and we cannot wait. That'll be St. Xavier when the Blue Devils will play their first ever Mid-States Football Association game. But for now, signing off after we got to experience some football for at least a little bit. I'm Jason Ross Jr. Fun day for the offense, fun day for the defense. Producer Kia Tyus, Desi Cook, Jenna Skalski up top. Plenty of our guys down on the field. Gabe O'Neill, Alex Johnson. I'm Jason Ross Jr. saying so long. Have a wonderful spring. We'll see you back on September 7th when Blue Devil football officially returns.